Triathlon Show 392. Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to another episode of That Triathlon Show, the podcast presented by scientifictriathlon.com. I'm your host Michael, and on today's episode I interview Professor Maria Francesca Piacentini from the University of Rome, Foro, Italico. We discuss the science of wetsuit swimming, which, to be honest, there isn't a whole lot of, but Maria Francesca and her team have relatively recently started working in this area and published a literature review and a study in a group of elite triathletes to get started down the path of better understanding exactly how a wetsuit impacts the performance, biomechanics, and the physiology of swimming in a wetsuit compared to non-wetsuit conditions. There are still a lot of unknowns, but in this interview we discuss what is known today from a scientific perspective, and then we have a discussion on some potential practical applications. But before we get into the interview, big thanks to our sponsors, Precision Fuel and Hydration. They help athletes perform at their best with electrolyte and fueling products and with free online tools, education, and a patented sweat test. You can use the free fuel and hydration planner on their website to get a personalized plan for your carbohydrate, sodium, and fluid intake. And you can also book a free 20-minute video consultation to chat through your plan with the athlete support team, something I recently did for my hydration in particular, which I had some struggles with, to be honest, and that worked brilliantly. In terms of products, I have used their entire range of products for a long time, and I think they're absolutely brilliant across the board. And you can get 15% off your first order by using the code TTS23 on precisionfuelandhydration.com. And thank you to Form. The Form Smart Swim goggles give you real-time feedback in your swim training right on the goggle lens, including splits, pace, stroke rate, and heart rate. This means that you can execute your swim workouts so much better, whether it's about pushing harder when you're starting to fall off the pace or holding back when you're accidentally going faster than you should. It also means that if you're using a Garmin watch in the pool or another watch, then you can finally get rid of that because the goggles automatically notice when you start and stop each of your intervals and give you very accurate splits for each and every one of them without having to disrupt yourself with trying to reach for the left button on the watch. But most importantly for me, the Form goggles add some fun and motivation to my swimming and makes me want to go to the pool more often because I just can engage with the swimming while I'm doing it a bit more when I see my splits and so on. You can get 15% off the goggles with the code TTS15 on formswim.com/TTS. Now, without any further ado, here's the interview with Professor Maria Francesca Piacentini. Welcome to That Triathlon Show, Maria Francesca. How are you doing?
Thank you, Michael. I am doing very, very well, and I'm pleased to be at your podcast.
I'm excited to have this chat with you. But first, before we get into the topic of wetsuits, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, I am a professor at the University of Rome, Foro, Italico, which together with the other two European universities, they are the only three that are completely dedicated to sports science. And I have been always interested in endurance sports already since my PhD studies that I did in Brussels, working on central fatigue. What I really, I got into open water swimming around 2015, and we realized with my former PhD student, Roberto Baldassarre, that despite open water swimming was a discipline Olympic discipline since 2008, there was hardly anything in literature that could really help the athletes and coaches. For this reason, I got interested in the research on wetsuit, which is the topic of today, mainly starting with my curiosity on open water swimmers because they are good swimmers, but not familiar with a wetsuit and have to use it for a very, very long time. So this was a bit our first research question.
Can you explain, for those that are not familiar, in the open water swimming competitions, a lot of them are, of course, non-wetsuit depending on the water temperature. So it's not like triathlon where we have a lot of races with a wetsuit. So that's why. But I guess when you say that they are good swimmers but they're not familiar with the wetsuit, it's because they really don't have to use it many times, but sometimes they do.
It is true. They don't use it many times. And the FINA just included it as a regulation only since 2017. So prior to that, actually, it was all without wetsuit. And it really depends on water temperature. And it's a bit more stringent, I would say, than what you use with triathletes. Just as an example, last weekend in Sardinia, there was a race, and the wetsuit was utilized, but normally in that race, it wouldn't be utilized. So it really then depends, of course, on water temperature and on the atmospheric conditions that, of course, have an impact also on the water temperature.
Okay, yeah. So let's get into some of the research that you have done and also that you have summarized. And maybe we can start with you did an overview, a systematic review of the literature, and maybe can you give an overview of why you or what you looked at in that overview, basically?
Yes, we were interested before starting our research in understanding what had been done with the wetsuit. So basically, I can summarize just to go short, but then I will go a bit more in detail that first of all, I have to say that wetsuits is made of a substance that's called neoprene, and it is a synthetic rubber that contains the bubble. So basically, the use of wetsuit, as we were saying before, is necessary for storing heat. After that, of course, people realize, and I think the athletes themselves just realize that as they put a wetsuit on, they just feel that their legs are not sinking as much and that they actually go faster. So we looked a bit into what has been done in the literature on wetsuit use, and we saw that, yes, you do go faster with a wetsuit. It is true what the athletes perceive when they're actually swimming with a wetsuit. And this is due to several factors, and I will just summarize 3. And I thought that just saying also how the wetsuit was, what it's made of, can have also an impact a bit on understanding a bit what happens when you put a wetsuit on. So first of all, we do swim faster because we increase buoyancy. So it's a bit how much you float. And that is the force that we get when we're swimming from below, and that keeps us up. But normally, not very good swimmers has a bit what we call the sinking legs. So the fact that the wetsuit helps your legs to remain a bit horizontal, actually, the impact that it has, it decreases the frontal area, and this actually decreases or reduces the drag. That is basically the resistance that the water exerts while we are actually moving forward. So having a better streamline, I would say, so a better horizontal position actually helps in the way to reduce the resistances we get in advancing in the water. Another aspect that has been shown already is that there is a reduction also in the drag that's caused by friction. So basically, how the fluid reacts against the surface of an object that's moving into the fluid. This is, for example, hair, your clothes, your skin. So already the material with which a wetsuit is done decreases this friction drag. And the third one, which not least of importance, of course, is that it actually increases propelling proficiency. That is a bit a measure of your stroke efficiency. So it seems, but this depends a bit on the speed at which tests have been done with wetsuit suit, that it has an effect on the stroke length. So how much you advance with each stroke. And this is calculated by an index that is called the stroke index, that is speed times the stroke length. So it is, as I was saying, an indirect measure of your stroke efficiency. So all these 3 have a great impact on the energy cost, basically. And basically, they do increase performance. And athletes feel also less fatigued while they swim with a swimsuit, with a wetsuit.
Can I stop you there for just one follow-up?
Of course.
What is the magnitude of the increase in speed, roughly, when we look at the studies that have been done?
This is a very interesting question, between 6 and 11%, but it really depends on some factors that I will be explaining a bit later, if you may. But that really depends on the length. Of course, it might be more in a longer task, less, of course, in a shorter task. And it really depends on the speed and also on the ability of the swimmer, that if this magnitude is, let's say, amplified or not.
Yeah, so weaker swimmers will get a bigger benefit.
And normally, yes, because of course, weaker swimmers are the ones that are positioned in the water in a less efficient way, I would say. So they benefit more also from a correct positioning. And also they are the ones that don't go that fast because they're weaker swimmers. And also the speed with which you actually move can help your, what is called the hydrostatic lift. So your legs will just go, further up just by increasing speed.
And then the other follow-up is when you say that the stroke efficiency, stroke length improves with the wetsuit, is that independent of the fact that you have the decreased drag? Or because it could be like, of course, it could be just because you are decreasing the friction drag and the pressure drag, and you have less sinky legs. But is this something that has been confirmed that it is independent also of those variables? You get a better efficiency of your stroke?
It, of course, depends a lot on the previous two parameters, but it actually also, yes, in basically it's due to these two parameters, and also to the fact that all three together reduce the energy cost of swimming. So you actually have a lower oxygen consumption during your swimming with a wetsuit. So I believe it is correct.
Okay, thank you. So please continue where you left off.
Yes, so, well, to synthesize the effects on performance, I just would say that with the wetsuit, it is correct, you go faster, you are positioned better in the water, you have a more efficient stroke, and I was saying, so as I was already saying, most athletes already perceive that as they actually use a wetsuit. And at the same speed, so if I do a test with and without a wetsuit at the same speed, I would just see, as I was saying, a decrease in energy cost and a reduced perceived exertion. So people actually feel less fatigued. They perceive it as less fatigued. Vice versa, if I have a distance to cover, then I will cover it in a less amount of time. So that's how it increases performance.
Got it. And let me see here. Is there anything else in terms of, let's say, the physiological or biomechanical variables that you think is important to summarize from the literature review, or do you want to go on to the study that you conducted?
Well, we'll probably just summarize a bit because you swim faster because of course, what I was saying. So physiological parameters that have been measured, as I was saying, are the oxygen at submaximal and stable speeds, and also the velocity at VO2 max or at lactate threshold, actually, if you do a test with a wetsuit, are higher. So, of course, this makes you understand how you can go faster. From a biomechanical point of view, I was saying there is already a difference in the stroke rate and stroke length. That really this depends a bit, honestly, on the speed of which the tests have been done. And on this, I was just saying one thing before saying, okay, it is like this, because it is very difficult to say this is exactly how it works, because results are still a bit discordant on how stroke rate and stroke length change with wetsuit or non-wetsuit, also in the magnitude of the changes, because comparing different protocols, different speeds, and different lengths of the tests, of course, has an impact, because just by increasing speed with two different protocols, of course, I already have a change in stroke length and stroke rate. Another point I did not mention before is normally it's seen, and I will get to this also later when I will talk about the results of the study, you get a lower number of kicks per stroke cycle. As much it seems unimportant, because most triathletes just forget that they have legs when they're swimming, but it is important because then you kind of preserve your legs also for the other parts of the triathlon. And again, the wetsuit, let's say kicking faster or more kicks per cycle actually also is one of those things that help you a bit also maintain a correct position. So this is already given by the wetsuit. This is why you can also decrease the kick count. Perceptually speaking, I already said you do have a decrease in perceived effort, but and this is something I will get back to later, I think it's an interesting point. A lot of athletes just perceive a higher discomfort while swimming with a wetsuit. And I will get to back to this later, because I think it's an important issue also when we are looking at the populations that have been tested. So overall, yes, performance increases. And as reported by Millet and Veronica Fleck, that have been important researchers also in the field of triathlon, the benefits of wetsuit have been seen also in the ITU triathlon races some decades ago. So it has been already seen that performances increased also in the decades with the use of wetsuit, meaning also that if we compare it now, let's say performances are even magnified probably because of the technological improvements in the wetsuit design, meaning that when I was talking about discomfort, also this has changed a bit. So probably the new generation of wetsuits are also less or more comfortable, I would say, and compared to the previous decade. So this is something also that we need to take in consideration when comparing such a long time span of research on wetsuit use.
That makes sense. And I guess just to wrap up this part of the questioning with the literature review, when you kind of think about all the literature or when you put together the review, what were the things that you came away thinking that and writing in the conclusions or discussion that, okay, these are open questions that we should aim to answer in future research, or these are big limitations of the current studies that have been done and that we should try to address in future studies? Can you highlight some of those issues?
Yes, of course. Before answering to that, I just want to make a small comment, because I was talking about the populations that have been tested, because in a way we have a population, normally triathletes have been compared or pool swimmers have been utilized, basically. Only one study on open water swimmers, which is a bit bizarre because they are the ones that then will actually use it. So what happens is you have pool swimmers that are very good swimmers. So they normally, of course, have a good buoyancy and so on, a good stroke efficiency, but they feel more discomfort with the wetsuit. On the other side, you have triathletes who are less, let's say, efficient swimmers, normally, not all, but they feel more comfortable with the wetsuit. So then it's always difficult to put all this information together. Also, the body composition of triathletes and pool swimmers is slightly different. And this, of course, has an effect on buoyancy and on the magnitude, on the effects that you already see, for example, in this population. So this is a bit of limitation, I think, in the literature. So it's important to compare always the same population that will be then basically utilizing a wetsuit. Because it's true, triathletes have more of an effect in stroke efficiency and kick count and all those that the swimmer already has naturally. What I think could be actually interesting to look at is, in my opinion, the tests done in the true environmental setting. So most studies have been done in the swimming pool in plus or minus 28 degrees. There is only one study, pretty recent actually, from the Portuguese group that looked at different water temperatures in open water swimming. But of course, if you need to use some devices and it's more complicated to do it in open water swimming, specifically in the non-wetsuit situation. I would be much interested in sex differences because male and females have different buoyancy, for example. So there's really nothing on that. And they already have a different ratio between stroke length and stroke rate. Age group differences or expertise in swimming has never been actually seen in the age group triathlete population, I'm saying. And basically, the last point, which is not the least because it's what led us to our study, is the effect on longer tasks. Why? Because we thought, well, could it be that on longer tasks, at the end, you might see more detrimental effects because it changes a bit motor coordination. So longer tasks have been studied, 1,500 meter and or longer studies, but not, let's say, with all the variables that we were interested in. We looked at some parameters that had already been seen in literature. So I agree that there was nothing new there, but we were more interested in seeing how if the athletes changed, let's say, their swimming pattern in these two different situations that could, on the long run, maybe fatigue them more with the wetsuit.
Okay, yeah. So that's a great segue into discussing about this study that you conducted. So can you describe a bit more what the protocol was exactly and the demographic?
So the first point is that the objective of the study was to evaluate the effects of a full body wetsuit, because of course there are differences between full and sleeveless, on biomechanical, physiological, and perceptual variables during a long task that was segmented, I would say. So it's a 7 times 200 meter with 1 minute recovery. All 200 meters had to be done at the same speed at their 1500 meter race pace, which was reported by the athletes themselves, and with and without the wetsuit. So this gave us, before then I go more in the methodological parts, gave us an idea of normalizing speed. So we actually can measure the differences between wetsuit and non-wetsuit condition. But the second point I think is extremely interesting and probably the most novel is to see within the same task, so within the 7 times 200 meter, how the biomechanics and the physiology changes with fatigue, with your last 200 meters, to see if there is a big difference in wetsuit and non-wetsuit condition. I think this is probably the most novel part of our study. So we recruited well-trained triathletes, 15 at the beginning, and 4 were discarded at the end, because we asked all athletes to have the same speed, as I was saying, in both situations, which could be a bit harder in the wetsuit situations for some of the athletes. And if the time difference was more than 3%, they were actually discarded. Each athlete performed the protocol twice, and we in a counterbalance order, of course. And they had a heart rate monitor, a strap. We measured RP before, during, after each 200 meter, and at the end. And then the test was also recorded by an underwater camera. So we would actually, were able to measure some of the parameters that I was talking about before, like stroke length, stroke rate, kick count, the stroke index, which I was talking about before. And basically these are the parameters that we looked at.
Great. So what did you find then? What were the results of the study?
So again, I will first try to summarize the results that we had within let's say the differences between a wetsuit and a non-wetsuit condition. So we see already some differences, because the trunk incline, for example, that just gives us an idea of the positioning of the body within the water, the kick count, so a lower number of kicks per cycle, the breathing count, heart rate, and rating of perceived exertion were lower per each 200 meter in the wetsuit conditions compared to the swimsuit condition. So why is this important? And I was saying trunk incline already tells us that they were positioned better in the water. They had a lower kicking count per cycle. And as I was saying before, it helps most probably these athletes also in the other parts of the race. Breathing count is important because, let's say, it kind of disrupts the correct streamline. So the fact that you're breathing more often, and heart rate is a physiological measure of internal training load as well as a rating of perceived exertion. So it just tells us that basically at the same speed, they were fatiguing less. And on the other hand, what increased so was the stroke length, as it had already been seen, and have been talking before, and the stroke index, of course, given that the speed was the same in the wetsuit, was higher than in the swimsuit condition. Within each task, and I think this is important, we saw that some parameters basically increased in the swimsuit condition only. So, for example, rating of perceived exertion, breathing count, heart rate, and basically increased in the swimsuit only and not in the wetsuit situation. So meaning that at the end of the task, they were more fatigued in the swimsuit situation rather than the wetsuit situation, given all that we have been talking about before. So of course, they had a decreased buoyancy in the swimsuit situation and so on. And stroke index and stroke length decreased significantly in the swimsuit situation. So the stroke length was decreased with fatigue in the swim situation, but not in the wetsuit situation. And I think this kind of summarizes a bit what we were saying before, and it kind of pinpoints again what are the most important effects of the wetsuit.
Yeah, exactly. And it shows, as you hypothesized, that, or as we talked about before, that with longer tasks, the wetsuit might be even more important. And who knows how big the difference would have been if you had done 15 times 200 or something like that, or 19 times 200, like an Ironman swim. So that could have been.
That is, I think, a very interesting point. We did the study, of course, in collaboration also with Triathlon Federation. So, of course, we did something that they were familiar with and that they could actually use in terms of practical application. But this is a very good point on very longer tasks. But again, I was saying my original question came from the open water world. So, even in 2 hours, and a 2-hour swim would be extremely interesting specifically because the open water swimmers tend to change pace towards the end of the race. So they have this really big increase in speed. So to see if they feel the shoulder constraints, if they feel uncomfortable with it, and things like that.
And but did you asked for that in the study, the perceived comfort, right?
Yeah.
So what did you find on that count?
At the end, they seemed pretty much, let's say, comfortable. So they did not have a negative perceived comfort. They were all wearing their own wetsuit, which again they were familiar with, and this is an important, let's say, outcome I would like to stress out here, because familiarization is a prerequisite, to feel comfortable and then to find also these effects. I mean, you find them also without familiarization, of course, but sometimes the discomfort can be also a bit more. So that's why it is very important to, let's say, train with your wetsuit and really get familiar with your race kit and race situation. The last point is, again, they felt comfortable with the wetsuit. Again, swimming with a wetsuit in a 28-degree pool is not like the best situation you would be looking for, I'd say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One thing we didn't mention that I think is quite important to point out is that they used a Finese tempo trainer, so they could control their pacing easily with that device to keep them on pace. So that wasn't a confounding factor or anything. So what conclusions and discussion points or practical applications would you then draw from this study, or what future research did you think that, okay, this is the next step for us to work on?
Yes, in terms of practical applications, I think it's important for triathletes to train with the wetsuit, so that they get comfortable with it. Also, in longer tasks, it does not change what. That was another main point of our study, what is called the motor coordination. That is an index that has been put forward by Chalet already in the early 2000s. That's a bit hard, the synchronization in your upper limbs. So our point was, like, if you go faster, or sometimes it may happen that with a wetsuit, it just could change. So the fact that it doesn't change its motor coordination, and makes us also think that the muscle activation is pretty similar. So it will not disrupt or fatigue, let's say, other muscles if you train with a wetsuit very close to competition. This was a bit one of our, let's say, practical applications. So we feel to say that also, if close to competition, you want to try your wetsuit for longer or shorter tasks, that is okay in terms that it will not, let's say, disrupt this point. I think it's important for triathletes to train with a wetsuit, but not only close to competition, and with their race kit. So with their trisuit underneath, so that they're comfortable with the whole situation. And possibly, when possible, in not all countries, of course, it's possible just before the first races in April or May to try to train in open water, because that's where they will be racing, because also getting familiar with cold waters, because it's a prerequisite if you're actually using a wetsuit, is extremely important. And I think this is the most important part, to get really familiarized with your wetsuit. And I think this is, let's say, the practical applications that we can come up with the results of our study. As to how to proceed, well, as I was saying, I would be interested to do, again, more and longer tasks, possibly with age group athletes also of different expertise level, and also eventually on open water swimmers if they think this could be an interesting study. But I think the longer task for them would be a good also index of how to include wetsuits also in their training.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a really great summary. I just want to reiterate what you said there. That I completely agree. It's important to practice with the wetsuit, and the more you do it, the more familiar you become. And what you mentioned there with training in the entire race kit with the trisuit, I think that's something that is equally important, because that's where I feel a lot of athletes maybe they miss out on that. They might train in their wetsuit, but if they don't train in their trisuit and they have a really kind of aerodynamic for the bike trisuit, but it's quite constricted or constricting for their shoulder mobility, then they might get to race day and not be at all used to that feeling. So I think that's a really good point that you bring up there.
Yeah, and I think it's another important point, because then you see people stuck in T1 is practice your wetsuit, but practice also to take out your wetsuit, because also when it's not only because they're very tight now, but also because when you swim in cold water, sometimes really you can have difficulty if they're really cold waters, just trying to unzip it and move it a bit.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. Is there anything else regarding wetsuits, whether it's practical or research, anything that we haven't talked about that you think we should highlight?
I think we covered pretty much everything. For what is known now, of course, there is a lot of literature there. So, of course, I was not able to summarize everything that has been done. Probably a bit more studies in real situation, I was saying. I think that would really, really help the world of triathletes. So in open water and in colder water temperatures, because already the physiology changes a bit when the water is colder. So we really need to know how it's affected with and without a wetsuit.
Yeah. So let's do the rapid fire questions then. And the first one is, what is your favorite book or resource related to endurance sports?
Okay, I will not mention any textbook, because there are so many very nice textbooks, and so I would not have a preference there. I just like to read books about endurance athletes, one, actually I'm mentioning two that are in Italian, but one is from our former Olympic champion, gold medalist in 2004, Stefano Baldini, and it's Con le ali ai piedi. And the other that I found really, really nice was a book regarding Shizo Kanakuri, that is the Japanese Olympic athlete that did not finish the 1912 Stockholm Marathon, although he was the favorite. And it's a very nice story, and they asked him to finish it. And so it took him 54 years, 8 months and 6 days to finish this marathon. But it's a fascinating story. What I like about these biographies and the story is to really understand the training that has been done to arrive at a certain point. And then, of course, what's all around performance, because you really have the feelings of the athlete. So I think this is a very, very nice point of view, in my opinion.
Yep, excellent. And what is an important habit that you've benefited from athletically, professionally, or personally?
I like to have a bit everything under control. So I like to, always be kind of well prepared and make sure that everything turns out well, which is also a backfire, because if something doesn't go the way you want, then of course you might not always be very well prepared. So that's something I have to train on a bit.
And finally, who's somebody that you look up to or that has inspired you?
Well, of course, there are a lot of people. The list would be, of course, very long. But I think I like to mention my PhD mentor and supervisor, which is Professor Messen from the Free University of Brussels, because apart from the scientific input that I received from him as a PhD student and further on in my career, I think that's very important for me professionally as a professor. As a mentorship, it's very important that you have somebody you can really look up to, and that's really helpful for you in certain moments of your career. So for that, of course, I thank him. And I think I can say without any doubt that it's him.
Perfect. And finally, where can listeners follow you?
In terms of social media?
Social media, for example, yeah.
I am not a social media person, but I have I have a Twitter account, which I do not know by heart in terms of name.
Yeah,
maybe.
I can put it in the show notes. I don't remember the handle, but I found it, so I have it.
Okay,
and I think you have ResearchGate as well.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm sorry, but ResearchGate, yes, it's a ResearchGate for what is research, and Twitter account, and that's it.
I think the main one really, because some of the studies here that we talked about are not open access, but maybe through ResearchGate people can get access.
Oh yeah, you can ask, and of course I think that's nice. I think, and thanks to you also, Michael, because they, this research that might just remain in a small domain of people reading it actually gets spread out. So I think if you really want to, as we do my work, that's a sports scientist, and you really want to reach out, to people and help them in what they do, and if the research just remains within a small number of people, it's not really doing any good. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and that is the goal indeed. Thank you so much, Maria Francesca. It was great to chat to you, and hope to do it again another time.
Thank you.
I hope that you enjoyed that interview. As always, you can find the show notes on scientifictriathlon.com with all of the links mentioned in the episode. Next Monday, I interview Michele Zanini, who has done a lot of research into running economy and durability at the University of Loughborough. And he also talks about his role as a physiologist with the Italian Triathlon Federation and about working with legendary running coach Renato Canova. So make sure you hit that subscribe button if you aren't already subscribed to make sure that you get all of the new episodes as they are released. If you want to improve your triathlon performance and want help to achieve your goals, then consider working with a scientific triathlon coach or training plan. We have options for athletes of all different levels and for different budgets, and no matter what your goal is. A few points that I want to highlight is that we have no minimum commitment term nor any startup fees for coaching. And for the training plans, we have a 100% satisfaction guarantee for plans purchased directly on our website. And we have an exchange guarantee so that you can exchange your plan for another plan if you purchase through Training Peaks. We also have consultation and customized plan options, so there's something for everyone. You can find out more and contact us on scientifictriathlon.com so we can discuss your goals and needs and see what's best for you. Finally, big thanks to our sponsors, Precision Fuel and Hydration, that you can find on precisionfuelandhydration.com. If you're looking for electrolytes and fueling products, I would highly recommend trying them out. You can use their free fuel and hydration planner or even a free video consultation with the team to prepare your race strategy. And don't forget to take 15% off your first order with the code TTS23. And thank you to Form that you can find on formswim.com/TTS. Improve your swim training with real-time metrics like pace, stroke rate, and heart rate, and advanced post-swim analysis. Use the code TTS15 to get 15% off the Form Smart Swim Goggles. Thank you, as always, for listening. Keep training smart and keep loving triathlon.